So first I want to thank the Corruption Prevention Network for inviting me to speak today. I'm aware that I have two audiences today. The first are the people who will be familiar with the types of corruption, the laws, standards, and know something about events. The second are those who are events people and know a bit about corruption, so anti-corruption. So I hope to bridge this divide today. First, forgive me for reading this part of the presentation, but I do have a tendency to veer off and I don't want to keep to this, and I won't, if I don't read it, I won't keep to the script. So we have 30 minutes. What you see on the screen there behind me is Dante's Geryon, with the face of innocence and the tail of a scorpion. Geryon represents fraud, one of the many types of corruption found in events. As Geryon exists in the netherworld, it's the world of secrecy. For example, a guard would never admit taking a bribe, but it could lead to a crowd crush, such as at the Asake concert, and then 2 deaths. Each risk is multiplied by the number of people. So let's start off with what are events. So firstly, it's a multi-billion-dollar and perhaps a multi-trillion-dollar industry around the world. No one really knows. And it covers just about every industry, from mining to banking and every country. Events range from your wedding through to the Oasis concert in Melbourne. I'm sure you would have heard of that. To the Indo-Pacific International Maritime Exposition in Sydney. Anything from concerts to hybrid learning events such as today. I have been involved in all sorts around the world, but to make it clear, my background is not accounting or forensics or law. It is events. In the upcoming slides, I will give you examples of corruption in events, and these are reported ones, then look at how the events sector has developed over the last 50 years, what I call the maturity model, then describe the unique aspects of events that foster corruption, and then finish up with what you can do for the next event. We start with two well-known ones. Well, we hope they're well-known. Certainly the Fire Festival was, and but it's unfortunately only the big ones really get to the press or the courts of law. So it's very important. Obtaining any data on petty corruption, such as the gate bribes, is near on impossible. In fact, part of the issue of finding information was the reluctance of almost all events people I talked to even discuss this topic. But in my years of experience around the world, I know it is a problem. The famous Fire Festival that never was, the luxury music event in a luxury island. You can find it online, there's lots about it, and there's a couple of films too, I think. It is, according to the trial report, a fine example of the Geryon fraud. Boy, it was the descent into fraud. It didn't start with that, according to the trial, but they didn't know when to stop. The Commonwealth Games in India, an excellent publication you can see on the screen there. It's like a manual on corruption. Many Australian companies, some of whom I knew, were caught up in this, and it demonstrated that corruption is like a virus. It can spread out very quickly to and from the suppliers. The Geryon then never goes away. So here are a few more. And of course, you don't need to read all these in detail. It's just to give you an idea of the scope of the problem. And once again, these are only the reported ones. The corrupt aren't forward in telling people what's going on. And you can download any of these at your leisure. And a few more for you, all around the world. and just more specific ones that comes from my book down there, The Dark Side of Events. It was fascinating because the academics didn't bring this up. And it led to, as you can see down there, a $50 million fine. And as I said, you can read this later. It was the librarian who actually brought it to the attention and actually termed the name Predatory Conference. And of course, there's the innocent people who go to events without any thought, one way or the other, and you can see there what that's about. They recruited young people at music events in Ireland, thought to be around 17 million euros illegally transferred. So if you look at events sector, and this is the environment, the events sector has developed over the years and grown enormously. For example, my work in Saudi Arabia, this country went from one event in Mecca to thousands of events to the 12 $1 billion festivals in 2018. The mega events in our stage 4, which is where we're up to this level 4, or most of the world is moving into that level 4. And as you can see, there's mandatory standards, codes and laws, etc. And the problem is it's the primacy of the mega events, and smaller events actually become uneconomic. And of course, the limits of this is bureaucratisation. So the mega events rule, and events that are under $100 million basically now have to use the standards and of the much larger events. So it's not scaled, and that is the period we're in now. So it's level 4. So we'll look at the standards, etc., that are coming through. I know that the CPN, Corruption Prevention Network, people know this inside out, but this is for the event audience today. So we'll start off with, of course, the UN Convention Against Corruption in 2003. And what I did was just map the various stages that have to do with events. And so I'll go down to stage 3, which is the big one when this publication came out. A very well written publication, but it's about major events. In fact, it's really about mega events, not what I'd call major events. These are events over $100 million in value or very high impact in terms of politics. Okay. Now, the next stage that happened was stage 4, and what came next, the Chambers of Commerce created policy, rules and guidelines, and at this stage, the sports industry was in high gear about anti-corruption. The UN recommended regarding events, and this is quite interesting, and it's come from the sports industry, regarded events as suppliers to a company or like a sponsor or government, and hence part of the value chain, which means an event is regarded as a supplier and would come under the procurement rules of those companies. Now, that's quite important when it comes qualifying as a supplier for an event. And recommending that suppliers of anti-corruption policies, codes of conduct, or in the least, anti-corruption as part of their risk management plan. Okay, also part of stage 4 was that sponsorship companies, big companies around the world, started their anti-corruption policies, as well as I said, the sports. Sports was way ahead of other events for a variety of reasons I won't go into or mention the NBA or... Then at the same time in stage 4, a lot of the standards were updated. And what was interesting about that stage for us in events was now started to emphasize the more trust and integrity rather than just the engineering approach to anti-corruption, which means forensics and basically mathematics. This then is now filtered down to local authorities, and by that I mean, and I'm just using New South Wales, I think, here as an example, and it's now filtered down to the various local councils. In the last couple of years, this has really increased enormously. And now what we have at this point, and this is where I say soon, is a good document that's just come out, and it's asking for feedback, and it's about procurement for local governments. Now, as I said, events can now be looked on as suppliers and therefore may well come under what this. So currently local councils in New South Wales are discussing a document on procurement that should have wide effects on events in New South Wales. So this is an evolving environment. The next step, you can be assured, is that companies and government will only deal with events that have some form of anti-corruption embedded in their management. All right, so let's just have a look at events themselves. What is it about events that would attract the corrupt or create corruption? Okay, and basically the management events is a combination of what Bruce Wyman talked about in his CPN talk on corruption in the construction industry, meaning that time is of the essence, there's multiple subcontracts, and it is project-based. And if you put that together with the type of chaos and complexity outlined by Karen Patterson in her CPN talk on council mergers, that these opportunities, there are a lot of opportunities in these situations. Now, if we have a quick look at these, the deadline is absolute. Unlike a construction project, the deadline, New Year's Eve is New Year's Eve, and that's it. It can't be like a few weeks later because the suppliers didn't get there. So that produced enormous pressure. And as you can see from here, here's the deadline. If you go across to the cost of changes as you get near to the event is enormous. And the time for considered decisions goes right down because of the complexity and the chaos. And of course, the level of risk of not managed goes right up. Now, this can lead to all sorts of issues, such as greasing the wheels, etc. Facilitation payments, trying to get things done very quickly. And basically, once it's over, the records disappear, people go their own way, and this is unlike the sort of, anyway, people go their own way. And then there's this attitude that if it was success, well, who cares if there was a bit of bribery and a little bit of argy-bargy going on? No, who cares? It was all a great success. Another part, and this is an important part, as you'll find in the Fire Festival, was that marketing tends to be exaggeration in the event industry because it's all dependent on ticket sales or attendees, numbers of attendees that are coming. So you have a tendency in events to exaggerate enormously, which can lead to fraud and can lead to all kinds of things that will happen. Of course, tickets are another area of fraud. There's multiple sources of money and there's multiple payments and there's multiple means. It's big money. It may not look big money if you're just looking at a small event, but even something like, for example, Sculpture by the Sea, which is down here where I live. They estimate around 400,000 people come to that, and it's free. So where's the money? Well, that 400,000 people probably spend $50 each on the day for lunch, for this, for coffee, God knows what. You multiply 50 by 400 and you get $20 million is floating around over that period. And that doesn't talk about the sale of the artworks and all the rest of the things that go into that type of event. So it's a big mistake to think that events, a little community event that gets 10,000 or 20,000 people is not worth much money. It's in fact, possibly over that time that the event's on, it's worth a lot more than any industry within that council area. Events cross borders, and that means you're going into different countries. I've had a lot of experience of this, and there's all sorts of attitudes to facilitation payments, to what we in the West call bribes, but in other countries they don't call it that, tips, and of course the big one is nepotism and cronyism, which is found in a lot of countries. I'll tell you about that if you want to know. The other thing is that an event will be a temporary organisation, meaning it's only there for the event and lead up to the event, and then it just basically disappears. Okay, so you have a workforce that suddenly comes in, or you may have 2 or 3 people at the beginning when you're pitching the event. As the event gets close, you may have up to 100, maybe 1,000 people, particularly if you're using local volunteers. Now, what's their background? How do you vet? How do you do the sort of things that the mega events have the money to do? Okay, and you've got lots of suppliers, and those suppliers can be very different to the ones that you've actually hired, the ones who come to the event on the day. And then finally, there's an attitude that basically anyone can run an event. Okay, if you can run your children's party, you can run your event, and that has to do with competency. All right, so there's a number of aspects, and what I did is just put together a bow tie diagram, if you like, of these, and you can download this and have a look at it. Other one, just one I want to mention is failure is catastrophic. Now, this is important because you could spend 9 months putting an event together, and if that event doesn't happen, that 9 months becomes a cost, and it could be a huge cost. There's very little way to redeem your money or recoup your money in that lead up to the event if the event doesn't go ahead. And once again, that leads to all kinds of last minute decisions that in the chaos and the complexity can mean corruption. One of the consequences I want to have a look at here is morale and the loss of trust within the team. Now, this is another important thing. Events are about people, and never forget that. Events are about people's experience, etc. And if some members of the team or the volunteers are, let's say, doing illegal things, then eventually people will know in the team and you'll lose the trust. And ultimately, as I write in the book, you can have a look at it, this is a cost. It's a transaction. Lack of trust is a huge cost in a situation like events. Trust within the team is vital in a complex and often chaotic environment of management. So you can see the contributing factors, you can see the consequences. Now we'll have a look at prevention. Okay. So what I did here, what I've done is using my experience of the many events people, that means the ones who bothered to would talk to me. I pulled in all the literature, news reports, and even rumours. And remember, corruption is secret. There is no database for what I'm talking about. Grok. Grok can only hallucinate and guess. To quote Grok when I asked it, that's why this table isn't built on data. It's built on 40 years of whispers, near misses, and the things people only admit after 3 beers. That was Grok's comment on the table. I put together this vulnerability table, which you can download. It's easy to use, it's free, and it looks for the areas open to corruption, hence vulnerability. I believe it can be used to inform the risk register. It probably takes maybe 15 minutes to fill out with your team, and I think many events will be surprised, as well as confirming what they have thought about. Now, you can download this for free using that QR code, but I would greatly appreciate points for improvement. The more stories of corruption or near misses, very important. After all, for all you events people out there, we're all in this together, and this table is just the first run. Some of the things here you might be interested in just for people who don't know about events. This term blagging is quite an interesting term in events, and that's people pretending to be the staff being able to get into the event. It's more common than you think, and there's even people who brag about blagging on the internet. You can look it up. The other thing of mild interest is the competitions. Often an event, well, a community event, for example, come up with an idea, well, let's have a competition. And suddenly you've opened up a whole new can of worms. Okay. And so it's an idea to, this helps you have a think about what a competition, you really have to think of it from that point of view. All right, so if you could download that and let me know, that would be fantastic. It'd make life, there's about 4 pages or 6 pages. I think it's very easy, and it's written in event terms. So basically 0, 1, it's none of these things are done. Okay, 5 needs review, and 10 means you're number 1, everything's fine. Okay. So just to summarise what I've been talking about, and then we'll have questions. These are my hypotheses, if you like. Events soon have to comply with stakeholder anti-corruption policies. As I said, that's starting to filter down to your local events, so the current guidelines really are for mega events, and they're not really scalable for the millions of smaller events. I mean, they're very good, there's no doubt about that, but the UN guideline for smaller events needs to be scaled down. Events, as I said, have unique corruption risk factors. The time is the most important, and the fact that you create value by having the event or reflects back into decisions that are made leading up to the event, and there can be a lot of problems there. Corruption is secret. Now, this is vital. There's no point in saying, well, what's the database or anything like that. There is no database. And the point is that petty corruption may be overlooked in certain areas, but when it comes to events, petty corruption can create major disasters. And if you look back on the disasters of events, of course, when they investigate them, petty corruption is never really looked at because it's just too difficult and not worth the money to actually investigate it down to that level of detail. However, it can be seen as contributing, if not causing, the disaster. So the point is that the events need trust and integrity-based tools, and it needs to be part of the everyday event management, and it needs to be designed specifically for the sector of events in their language, and that's what we've done with this vulnerability table. Other things that may be needed is a code of ethics and, of course, anti-corruption policy, but we can get onto that another day. So just to finish up, I want to talk about Louis Ragot's triangle at one of the lectures that he gave for the Corruption Prevention Network. And it was quite interesting because it's similar to what I've been talking about with regard to the analogy of the iceberg. We only see a very small amount of the corruption when it comes to events. It's secret. But with an iceberg, at least you can look under the water. Right? You could look under the water and see how big it is. With the sort of corruption I'm talking about, you can't, right? That corruption lives in the netherworld. And the most we can do at this stage is preventative actions. In other words, as when I was working in South Africa, the Zulu guy I was working with told me this great saying. He said, stop, he said, let us all turn on the lights. But when the lights are off, the cockroaches scurry around. It's another metaphor for you. Thank you very much.